a brief summary of the diaspora movement of Freemasonry in South Africa, titled The Evolution of South African Freemasonry. The presentation is not intended to be a research project, but rather a story of Freemasonry and its evolution since the first formal settlement at the Cape of Good Hope by Jan van Riebeeck in 1652 under the auspices of the Company of 17 of the Dutch East India Company. Van Riebeeck's instructions were to establish a station at the Cape to provide company ships with fresh fruit and vegetables, water and repairs. All this was accomplished, and in addition, good relationships were established with the local groups of the indigenous population then inhabiting the area of the countryside adjoining what we know today as Cape Town. These groups were to become the initial source of cattle and sheep for fresh meat supplies to the ships. Freemasonry first visited the Cape some years before the formation of the Lodge de Goede Hoop, presently number 1 on the register of the Grand Lodge of South Africa, on the 2nd of May 1772. Visiting ship captains as well as company officials were at the Cape for short periods, and they would meet in informal gatherings. Brother Abram Chiron, who had been resident at the Cape from 1769, became the first master of Lodge de Goede Hoop, having been affiliated to Lodge Ze Inrecht at Frankfurt on Main in 1765. Brother Chiron held office in the Rose Croix degree, and it appears that by virtue of that office and rank, he acted on his own initiative in the initiation of candidates and conferred other degrees. A brother van de Weytry had been commissioned by the Grand Master of the Netherlands, Baron van Boetsenale, to act as Deputy Grand Master abroad. Van de Weytry was a member of the Lodge Solomon in Bengal and frequently visited the Cape on the passing ships. April 24, 1772, Brother Van de Weytry convened a meeting of the Brethren at the Cape of Good Hope for the 2nd of May 1772, when 10 brethren assembled under the presidency and elected the master of the and officials of the lodge. 2 days later, he issued a provisional warrant subject to the approval of the authorities in Holland. The Lodge de Goede Hoop came into being on 5th of May 1772. A formal petition was drawn up to be forwarded to the Grand Master in Holland. The following April, the charter was received, dated the first day of the 9th month of the year L5772. The founder members of the lodge were Abram Chiron, Petrus de Wit, Jacobus A. de Verber, Johannes A. van Scheer, Peter Squemus, Baron H.R. van Oudtshoorn, Jan Guy, Olaf G. de Wet, Christoffel Brandt, and Johannes Snyders. The lodge attracted many prominent officials, of whom the following were in the service of the Dutch East India Company: A. Chiron, J. A. van Schuur, and C. Brandt, together with a number of other senior members of the committee. Brandt became a resident of Simonstown in May 1774. O.G. de Wet was the landrost or magistrate of Stellenbosch, some 30 miles from Cape Town. He was promoted to the master of the warehouse later in 1782. J. Snyders was not a resident but was captain of the ship de Papua, the vessel which had brought Van der Wet from Holland. Almost from its formation, the new lodge came under attack from the church. A letter dated June 1774 to the Grand Master of the Netherlands stated that the main reason for the lodge's lack of progress was due to the warnings from the pulpit, which had caused wives to persuade husbands to hold aloof from Freemasonry. Further, the letter referred to certain condemnation within the lodge for its application of the principles of equality within the lodge itself. It appears that some saw a danger to the stratified society of the Cape at that time, with the various rankings and protocols of officials and free burghers meeting as equals within the lodge. In 1781, the lodge went into recess until 1794 because of the antipathy towards Freemasonry. Its rejuvenation in 1794 was helped considerably by the lodge attracting many prominent company officials as members, as exemplified by the joining of Johannes Andreas Truter, who later became the Chief Justice of the colony. Masonic life was subjected to a change in 1795 when the Cape came under the British occupation and lodges attached to regiments arrived. These new arrivals encouraged civilians, both English and Dutch, to apply for admission to form new lodges. The doyen of lodges at the Cape was Lodge de Goede Hoop, which gave authority to the Military Lodge No. 1 Africa to meet on 27 January 1798. From Africa No. 1, a new Dutch lodge, de Goede Trouw, was formed in 1800. Richard Blake, then private secretary to the governor Sir George Young, brought with him from England the warrant of the Royal York Lodge, which caused some trouble when a certain petitioner who represented that the warrant had been lost or misplaced. When this came before the Grand Secretary of English Freemasonry in London, who stated that the warrant should not have been taken out of Bristol, England, without permission, as it could be of no use outside that city. At the same time, he exonerated Brother Richard Blake of any wrongdoing. Blake, together with certain high officials of the garrison, formed and opened a lodge under the Royal York warrant on 24 June 1800. The lodge purchased the property from Lodge de Goede Hoop, and it was registered in the names of the members. When the Royal York collapsed, Lodge de Goede Hoop repurchased the property in January 1802 at the original sale price, which seems to exemplify the good spirit amongst the fraternity. Brother Van der Wet, earlier mentioned, died a tragic death just 9 months after he had inaugurated Lodge de Goede Hoop. It appears that after a dinner given by the acting governor, name of Van Plettenberg, Van der Wet fell out with Captain Cassel, and they crossed swords. Van der Wet was wounded and taken to hospital, where he died on 31st January 1773. Source information provides no detail of the cause of the fallout, but does record that he was laid to rest in the grounds of the Grootkerk in Cape Town, with the comment that this was probably the first Masonic funeral at the Cape. During the period 1772 and 1781, an unusually high number of candidates were initiated, but they did not join the lodge. Most of them were seafarers who apparently obtained higher degrees elsewhere, but obtained their basic degree while the ships were in the Cape waters. In present time, the rules have changed so that no candidate is initiated without becoming a member of a lodge, with the progressive degrees being processed in the same lodge or, by its permission, in another lodge of the same constitution. During the 1700s, it was difficult to establish membership attendance, or in many instances to establish the exact membership. No attendance register were maintained, and the minutes would record attendances as all members present except named absentees, which didn't help the researcher. In January 1774, the lodge decided to purchase a slave as part of the lodge's movable property, but the purchase never eventuated. Instead, the lodge agreed to hire a young slave to assist the serving brethren. The hiring and firing and purchasing of slaves became a feature of the lodge management for many years until it ceased in 1818. 1777 records the first working of the lodge using English and not Dutch as the medium of communication. Brother Sharon had taken the chair as the then master appears to have had insufficient knowledge of English language to initiate two candidates recommended by Brother John Buckham, a surgeon in the service of His Britannic Majesty. The candidates were William Jarrett of Chatham, the accountant on the ship Swallow, and John Dobell of Jersey, aged 32, a surgeon of the same ship. 1795 saw the first British occupation of the Cape when British troops advanced on Muizenberg, and a Brother Berhardus Cornelius van Breda, a major in the company's service, made a strategic withdrawal from the camp at Wynberg to the safety of the castle in Cape Town, some 8 miles away. And in this manner the first occupation began. Lodge de Hoop lost no time in cementing fraternal bonds with the British, as it is evidenced by a lodge deputation on 19th of October 1795, inviting the English brethren, Rear Admiral Sir George K. Elphinstone and General Craig, to attend a meeting. The Admiral apologised for absence as he had a prior important engagement, but the General accepted. The Master surrendered his gavel to the General as Governor of the colony and solicited his protection of the lodge in that capacity. On the 2nd of November 1793, General Craig attended the lodge again and was accompanied by Major General James Henry Clark, whose aide-de-camp, John Malcolm, was initiated. A week later he was promoted to the 2nd degree. Further, John Jackson, secretary to the Admiral, was admitted to the order. It is recorded that the Grand Registrar in England spoke no more than the truth when he said in Grand Lodge that Dutch lodges received the English brethren with open arms and with great satisfaction. On St. John's Day, festival of 1795, the lodge admitted as honorary members Major General J.H. Craig, Commander J. Blanket, Colonel Duncan Campbell, Captain J. Bridges of the Engineer, and Major Parkhill. In spite of the vibrant progress, the lodge found itself with an unfortunate problem. It appears that the warden, Colonel DeLille, had become unpopular with a number of other members of the lodge who were of opinion that he and his infantry could have made a stand against the English instead of retreating. 7 burgher, in other words Dutch officers, drew up a document which was forwarded to the commissioners and charged Colonel DeLille with treason. He was arrested, charged, and acquitted for treason. Such was the popular fury against him, however, that he entered the British services on 27 October 1795 as a barrack master in Cape Town. He resigned from the lodge in December 1795. 1797 produced 2 outstanding events. A committee of the lodge entered into an agreement to purchase the first property, which took some 2 years to finalize. The second event came in the form of a letter from Brother J.G.F. van Buckstrom informing that a lodge had been established under the name The Incorruptible, and noted that he shortly expected a warrant from the Grand Lodge of the United Kingdom. Some 2 months later, he was superseded as secretary for non-attendance and wrote letters of protest to his fellow members in both Dutch and English languages, which would have indicated membership from both nationalities as members of Lodge Incorruptible. Early in 1798, however, Lodge de Goede Hoop did not recognize Lodge Incorruptible, as it was considered irregular in that it had not yet received a lawful establishment or constitution. Nothing more is known of this lodge, as the hoped-for warrant was not received from England. The only relic at the moment is a finely engraved silver seal now in possession of the Goede Hoop Lodge Museum in Cape Town. During 1789 and 1799, several petitions were presented to the Goede Hoop for recognition of military lodges at the Cape, but all but one from the Brethren of the 98th Regiment. On 8th January 1798, a document signed by 17 Brethren of Goede Hoop confirmed the approach and passed it to the illustrious Protector Lord Macartney and General Dundas for their approval as officers of state and Brethren of the Craft for approval to assemble for meetings, but not to hold reception constitutions. Thus was formed Lodge Africa No. 1, eventually a warrant granted by the Athol Grand Lodge in England on 27th of August 1798, and much later after Africa No. 1 had closed, the warrant was presented to the English Grand Master in 1799. Some 95 names appear on the lodge register, of whom 80 were initiates and some were joining members. The arrival and subsequent departure for India of a number of English regiments with ambulatory lodges stimulated considerable interest in Freemasonry generally, with a number of English members of Goede Hoop desired joining the lodge under the jurisdiction of the Grand Lodge of England. As witnessed by the albeit irregularity of the Incorruptible Lodge, which failed. This was followed by the Africa Lodge No. 1 at the Cape of Good Hope and No. 321 under the Grand Lodge of England. As stated earlier, neither lodge survived for long. With peace and the signing of the Treaty of Amiens in 1802, the British returned the Cape to the Batavian Republic and evacuated the Cape in February 1803, leaving behind only civilians to represent English Freemasonry. They were welcomed by the two Dutch lodges, namely de Goede Hoop and de Goede Trouw. But in 1806, another war involved British garrisons again occupying the Cape, from 1806 to 1814, to protect their trade route to the Far East. The Commander-in-Chief, Major General David Byrd, was also a Mason, in whom Sir John Truter found a strong ally. Sir John Truter, then the Chief Justice of the colony, succeeded Richard Blake as Provincial Grand Master for South Africa in 1826 and remained in office until the formation of the Provincial Grand Lodge in 1829. From 1799 to his death in 1845, Sir John represented the Grand Orient as Deputy Grand Master, a function similar to that of Provincial Grand Master under the English Constitution. These appointments well illustrate the good fraternal relationship at the Cape. Richard Blake, of previous mention, was the first Provincial Grand Master for South Africa from 1801 to 1826. It was he who brought the Royal York Lodge warrant from Bristol, which caused some embarrassment in high quarters. The increasing numbers of English-speaking members in the Goede Hoop Lodge caused a number of the English speakers to break away and found the first permanent English lodge in 1811. The British Lodge number 334 celebrated its bicentenary in September 2011, the first bicentenary celebration in the Southern Hemisphere. By coincidence, the bicentenary Master of British Lodge is Anthony T. Sayers, past Junior Grand Deacon and Assistant District Grand Master of South Africa Western Division, a name very similar to that of the first Grand Master of the United Grand Lodge of England. However, Anthony Sayers, the Centenary Master, disclaims any lineage connection. Within 10 years of the founding of British Lodge in number 334, it had been joined by two other English lodges, Union Lodge and Hope Lodge, established in 1812 and 1821 respectively. The membership mainly coming from the ever-increasing merchant, tradesmen and skilled workers arriving at the Cape under the British administration. The advent of the arrival of the 1820 settlers in the Eastern Province from Port Elizabeth led to the establishment of the Albany Lodge in Grahamstown. This is some 700 miles from Cape Town by road. It was not until 1834 that the two Dutch lodges in Cape Town, namely Goede Hoop and Goede Trouw, were joined by a third established in Graafrenet, some 250 miles north of Port Elizabeth. Graafrenet had been established in 1786 by the Cape Governor Jacob de Graaf as a settlement to stabilize a troubled frontier. These developments had seen the spread of Freemasonry beyond Cape Town. Some of the development of the hinterland had arisen as a result of certain disenchantments of a number of settlements with the political rule from Cape Town. This was reflected from Port Elizabeth area as well as at the Cape. In 1824, at the request of the Lodge de Goede Hoop, the Grand Orient of France warranted a French lodge, the Lodge d'Esperance in Cape Town. It ceased to operate in 1841 or thereabouts. A copy of this lodge's ritual is in the English District Grand Lodge Library in Cape Town. At this period of the Dutch lodges were under a common authority of a Deputy Grand Master National in the person of Sir John Andreas Truter, the Chief Justice at the Cape. But the English Lodge had no such authority until the Grand Lodge of England requested Truter to accept the appointment of the English Provincial Grand Master at the Cape, which he accepted and held until he resigned in 1833 to hand over his office to Brother Clark Burton, who had been Master of the Hope Lodge. He retained this appointment until his death in 1845 at the age of 80. Masonic jurisdiction amongst the English lodges was not all smooth sailing, for a number of country lodges wished to maintain their independence from Cape Town. A similar situation to the reaction of settler population resistance to the political rule from the Cape. Albany Lodge in Grahamstown was considered to be the ringleader in the matter, and it was not until 1878 that they accepted the local jurisdiction. The advent of the Great Trek of 1835 to 1838, as a result of political unrest, when large numbers of Dutch burghers leaving the English areas of political rule and following the emancipation of slaves and giving of equal rights to the status to the Hottentots as enjoyed by the whites. This all had its effect upon Masonic activity, in that many members of the existing lodges left the towns, resulting in the financial difficulties for lodges, some of which were obliged to close. In addition, the internal rivalry or schisms between lodges hindered Masonic progress, and this reflected the continuing English-Dutch rivalry in both economic and political fields. In the beginning of the 1850s, there were 4 English lodges in the country, of which 3 were in Cape Town, namely British Lodge, the Hope Lodge, and Union Lodge. The last 2 being erased in 1871 and 1851, respectively. And there was 1 further lodge in Grahamstown, the Albany Lodge. The Dutch lodges at the time were in Cape Town, the Goede Hoop and the Goede Trouw, and in Graafrenet de Verenigen, which was founded in 1844. A somewhat desolate picture, but it must be remembered that outside of Cape Town at that particular time, the population was very thinly spread. Expansion along the Eastern Cape coast helped to revitalize the interest in the craft. The opening of Durban stimulated the formation of lodges in that area. The Deputy Grand Master National, Sir Stoffel Bront, put in yeoman effort to stimulate interest and establish new lodges by setting out on extensive cross-country journeys by horse and ox wagon. His mission was mostly successful, but a few new lodges in the country failed for various reasons after a short spell. On one of his expeditions, he founded the first lodge in what was known as the Transvaal, Lodge Flaming Star, which he established in Potchefstroom, which was some 1,100 miles from Cape Town. A man of dedication and determination. The English Masonic activity reactivated with the formation of Lodge Zetland at Fort Beaufort in 1852 and Lodge Goodwill in Port Elizabeth in 1857 and in Lodge Port Natal in Durban in 1858, followed by Prince Alfred Lodge in Pietermaritzburg in 1863. But the British lodges were still close by to the coastal ports. Membership was coming from merchants and professionals who saw great potential in the opening up of several ports and neighbourhood embryonic towns. In 1860s, more new lodges were formed. St John's Lodge in Grahamstown in 1860, British Kaffarian Lodge in King Williamstown in 1861. Both drew membership from the military detachments during the frontier wars in that period. More expansion came from the formation of Midlands Lodge in Harfrenet in 1861, Chopper at Cape Town in 1861, Union at Knysna in 1862, Star of East at Queenstown in 1862, and St Paul's in Adelaide in the Eastern Cape near Port Elizabeth in 1863. Much impetus of this expansion is attributed to the mercantile expansion along the eastern coast and the migration from Cape Town, which created local momentum. During the same period, there was expansion of Dutch lodges, due, as stated earlier, to the missionary journeys of Sir Christopher Bront. New lodges formed as a direct result of Brant's travels included the Rising Star at Bloemfontein in 1862, Star of the East at George in 1863, Flaming Star at Potchefstroom, already mentioned in 1863, the Uni Lodge at Bloemfontein in 1865, Excelsior Lodge in 1865 at Willemore, the Northern Lodge at Colesberg, right in the middle of the country, in 1866, Lodge St Jan at Malmesbury, some 45 miles from Cape Town, in 1866, Oranje at Paarl in 1866, a mere 35 miles from Cape Town, Patronheid at Philippolis, again near Colesberg, in 1869, Lodge Eendracht in Somerset East in 1869, and Lodge de Vriendskap at Adelaide in 1869. This expansion was not without its tribulations, for in several cases there were obstructions by both English and Dutch lodges already existing to the formation of another lodge in the same area. As in Harfrenet, one of the obstructions was that the English lodge refused tenancy of their premises to the new Dutch lodge. However, that was reconciled and they became tenants. In similar instances, two lodges in a town relied on support from each other in order to hold meetings, so a good fraternal fellowship was re-established. Unfortunately, all this expansion had an almost disastrous effect when English and Scottish lodges claimed in letters to Sir Christopher Bront that the Masonic jurisdiction of the Dutch lodges did not extend beyond the Cape, and that those he had established outside the Cape boundaries were illegal and in violation of the Convention of 1770. The position was further aggravated by the Provincial Grand Secretary of the English Lodge in advising Bront that his Provincial Grand Lodge had sent a memorial in June 1866 to the Grand Lodge of England for advice on the legality of the Netherlandic Constitution forming lodges in the Cape. Much hard exchange of letters ensued until Sir Richard Southey, the then District Grand Master, discovered that his District Secretary had been dispatching unauthorised correspondence to Bront and to the lodges. Southey informed Bront that he had dismissed his secretary for dereliction of duty and repudiating his acts and writings. Grand Lodge of England confirmed that the 1770 Convention did not apply to South Africa, where English and Dutch lodges had existed side by side since 1812 on neutral ground of the Cape. Good relations, although bruised, were re-established. An interesting anecdote on the good relationship existing is when the English Lodge St Paul's in Adelaide, Eastern Cape, petitioned Bront for a warrant to set up a Dutch lodge in the town to be known as Lodge de Vriendschap, English translation being Lodge of Friendship. The English brethren stated that the reason for the request was to enable a number of their members to enjoy Freemasonry in their own language, as they were not very fluent in English. The positive result was that many farmers who were not members became members of the same lodge, and all worked and met in real spirit of harmony and brotherhood. At this point of time, it be noted that most of the English lodges had been formed along the coast, close thereto, while the Dutch lodges had developed more inland. The first call for unification was heard around 1869, when there had been talk of founding provincial Grand Lodges in the Transvaal and the Orange Free State Republics. The talk for unification was to unite under one Grand Lodge all the English, Dutch and Scottish lodges in the country. Bront is recorded as never public supporting the movement because of his earlier legality and recognition worthy of the English Constitution, whom he considered to be following Lord Carnarvon in a desire to unify the country politically, and this same thinking seemed to apply to Freemasonry. One of the prime reasons for unification was that all lodges owed substantial sums of money to their Grand Lodges in Europe. In addition, unification would simplify administration and make speedier contact with their Grand Lodge. All this happened in the early 1870s, and similar suggestions have been made right through to a referendum in 1968. Jumping the time gap to 1961, similar moves were made for unification when the Grand Lodge of South Africa was established to overcome difficulties which originated in Holland by the Grand East of the Netherlands. It could have been an ideal opportunity for unification, but Right Worshipful Brother T.N. Cranston Day, the then District Grand Master of the English District, who together with Colonel Graham Botha had been instrumental in the formation of the Grand Lodge of South Africa, he was totally opposed to the unification and had self-confessed Anglophile. Had he been of the opposite opinion, his stature and influence could in all possibility have carried the day. Since 1961 there have been little moves and very weak efforts to renew the idea of unification, although much muttering of members when the overseas Grand Lodges increase their dues or when the currency exchange rates go against South Africa. The first Scottish Constitution lodges were formed in the Cape in 1868 under the title Lodge Southern Cross, number 938 Scottish Constitution. Of its founders, 11 were initiated to the Lodge de Goede Hoop, and it took until 16th September 1901 for the Scottish lodges to form a provincial Grand Lodge with 3 constituent lodges, namely Lodge Southern Cross, Lodge of the Lawn, both in Cape Town, and Lodge Royal Alfred in Simonstown. Subsequently, Scottish lodges were established throughout the country, and unlike the English and later the Irish, they permitted lodges to be formed using a language of choice, either English or Dutch, which later became Afrikaans. The terms English, Irish, Scottish, Dutch, South African represent the constitutions and not necessarily the nationality or birthplace of members. In various lodges of each constitution, it is quite usual to find members of a variety of nationalities in any one lodge. For example, Lodge de Goede Hoop in of the South African Constitution has at this present time the following nationalities amongst its members: South Africans, born and bred, English and Dutch, French, Italian, Congolese, Nigerian, ex-Rhodesians and American, whilst British Lodge has currently members of English, Austrian, New Zealand, Australian and American. Returning to the development of Masonic activity, it must be recorded that the first lodge under the Irish Constitution was formed in Cape Town in 1896 under the name of St. Patrick's Lodge, number 199. This was followed by the founding of Killarney Lodge, number 360, on the 7th of December 1903, and Excelsior Lodge 368 on 15th December 1903. The Irish Provincial Grand Lodge was constituted 15th of April 1925, the first Provincial Grand Master being the Reverend Frank O.M. Waters, D.D., who it is noted by the Worshipful brother T.N. Cranston Day in his History of British Lodge as Right Worshipful Reverend Francis Octavius Montgomery Waters, D.D. This latest Provincial Grand Lodge made the fourth constitution working in South Africa. The three lodges mentioned were and continue to work in Cape Town, with two more being founded in the Cape Town, to which it is added one in Worcester, one in Port Elizabeth and one in East London to form the Cape Southern Province of Masonic jurisdiction. As with other constitutions, the Irish gradually spread to the inland areas. The year 1876 provided a major impetus to Masonry to the Northern Cape, with the finding of the first diamonds on the farm de Kalk in the Hopetown area. More diamonds were found in the vicinity, including the Star of South Africa, a jewel of some 83.5 carats, which was bought for £30,000 by the Earl of Dudley. The epicentre of diamond mining industry soon moved to Kimberley. Masonry in Kimberley soon outshone Cape Town as the centre of activity. Lodges were formed in the town and along the smaller digging towns on the Vaal River. Many Masons were among those who came from overseas, but the effect on the existing coastal and nearby lodges was almost disastrous, as so many members left the coast and the towns there to seek their fortune at the diamond diggings. Somehow most survived, due in all probability to the backup support for the new town provided by the more established commercial and trade facilities of the older established towns. With the organising and commercial ability of men such as Barney Bonato, Cecil John Rhodes and Ernest Oppenheimer, the new industry became well controlled and a world force in the marketplace as far as gem and industrial diamonds were concerned. Wealth walked the streets of Kimberley. Freemasonry flourished. The Masonic Temple and its adjoining facilities rank amongst the finest example of the earliest 20th century Masonic buildings. The lodge in Kimberley has dedicated rooms for every order worked in the area, as well as the administrative offices and refectories, etc. During the South African War, 1899 to 1902, Masonic Centre served as a hospital for wounded sick soldiers. Today, the complex also boasts an elderly people's home, which is maintained as an interconstitutional project. Although the first discovery of gold on the Witwatersrand was made in 1853, it was not until 1886 that what is today known as Johannesburg was founded. Gold mining soon overtook the diamond mining as a site for adventurers to seek their fortunes, resulting in another drift northwards from both the coast and the diamond fields. Again, Freemasonry established itself in and around the goldfields of South African Republic, also known as the Transvaal. Today, the area is by far the largest Masonic area in South Africa, the English Constitution alone having a district of 105 lodges. The South African War, 1899-1902, slowed down the rate of Masonic development within South Africa. It was not without its fraternal good spirits. Brother George Kendall, in his paper in the Ars Quater Coronatum, volume 97 of 1884, pages 20 to 32, relates a number of instances where combatants of both sides helped their fraternal opponents in various ways as an exercise in Masonic spirit. It has been claimed that the combatant Masons met together in a lodge in the Orange Free State, but this is yet to be proven. Whilst on St. Helena Island in 1901 to 1902, as prisoners of war, some 38 members of the South African lodges were paroled to visit both St. Helena Lodge number 488 and Old Rock Lodge number 912. Among those visiting were Brother General Ben Vujun, Brother E.J. Klee, General Cronje, H. de Wet Hamer, former Secretary of the Transvaal Volksraad, and Brother Colonel C. van Braun of the German Brigade in Boer War. So far in this narrative, little has been said of Freemasonry in the province of Natal. Here, as in Cape Town and Port Elizabeth, Freemasonry commenced at the port of Durban. Once commerce had commenced and established a stable population, the Port Natal Lodge number 738 was warranted on the 3rd of March 1858 and later constituted on 14th of June 1858. The lodge number was changed from 1040 to 738 in the closing up of gaps in 1863. Natalia Lodge number 1665 was concentrated on the 4th of April 1877 at Pietermaritzburg, some 55 miles inland from Durban. The Masonic Centre in Pietermaritzburg has a fairly modern, in Masonic terms, temple, completed under the English Constitution, and like Kimberley, has a home for seniors operated by the four constitutions together. In 1896, Ashawi Lodge number 2596 was founded in Ashawi in Zululand. In its original petition, the request was made that the lodge was to be under the direct jurisdiction of the United Grand Lodge of England. And this was on the grounds that Zululand was a new Masonic area, and in spite of distance differentials, communications with England were quicker than from the District Grand Lodge in Pietermaritzburg. Not unexpectedly, this request was declined by London. Ashawi is the capital town of Zululand. Unfortunately, the lodge was obliged to return its charter in 2008 due to lack of members. A past master of Ashawi Lodge in 1998, brother of the Reverend Canon John Salt, became Bishop of St. Helena Island. And after having been a regular visitor to the St. Helena Lodge 488, he became a joining member in 2009. The diamond and gold rushes, having temporarily depleted membership in the coastal areas and the nearby hinterland, lodges resulted in a slow regathering of membership and extension of all 4 constitutions into what was known as Rhodesia and Namibia. Unfortunately, the advent of World War I, 1914, caused a nationwide depletion of members, as many young brethren felt duty-bound to join the armed forces. A number of lodges were obliged to close for lack of members. Post-war, there was an upsurge of membership until the Great Depression of the 1930s, of 1920. By 1939, the real movement of Masonic activity had resolved itself into a wide cross-country spread. New development consisted of new lodges in towns where lodges were already established or near neighbouring towns. Unfortunately, the onset of World War II, 1939-1945, had a similar effect on membership as its predecessor of 1914-1918. Again, there was an upsurge immediately post-war. 1948 saw a major change in the political scene of South Africa when the Nationalist Party ousted the United Party as the country's government. It further entrenched itself by a resounding victory in 1953, consolidating its position and doctrine. The Dutch Reformed Church again began its attacks on Freemasonry. By 1964, the position had gone to the point where Dr. H.F. Verwoerd, the then Prime Minister and an ultra-conservative political, was urged by the leader of the opposition, Sir de Villiers Graaf, to appoint a judicial commission to inquire into the allegations that Freemasons and others so-called secret societies such as Sons of England, Oddfellows, etc., were acting in a manner prejudicial to the affairs of state. Verwoerd was persuaded to include the Afrikaner organizations of Broederbond in the required group of investigations. A judicial commission of inquiry was appointed, with the commissioner being an appellate court judge, the Honourable Justice D.H. Botha. Freemasons of all constitutions formed a united front to defend the cause and had established an interconstitutional delegation to present submissions. This delegation was led by the doyen of the district Grand Masters and a very strong leader, Right Worshipful Brother T.N. Cranston Day, known locally and with true fraternal affection as the Little Man. In his report to Parliament, the Honourable Judge interestingly made the following observation: Freemasonry in South Africa is not a danger to the state or the peace of the nation, and so the matter rests. AQC Volume 78 of 1965 contains substantial detail of the report insofar as it relates to Freemasonry. This judgment was of great consolation not only to the whole craft in South Africa, but especially to the recently formed Grand Lodge of South Africa, which had been constituted with the blessing of the 3 British regular Grand Lodges in 1961. In spite of many and varied calls for the formation of Grand Lodge of South Africa, from as far back as the appeal by Lodge Harmony in Richmond in 1870, the incentive for such formation was not provided within South Africa, but from a post-World War II situation in the Netherlands. Here, the situation of the Grand Lodge was in chaos as a result of suppression by the Axis forces. In Europe, the Grand Master of the Netherlands, one Right Worshipful Brother C.N.R. Davidson, endeavouring to bring about a unity of Freemasonry in post-war Europe, embarked on a misguided course of comment, amongst other things, in saying, that for Freemasonry to be universal, the lights were to be indispensable, but that no particular interpretation of them was demanded. A remark he was later to regret. Eventually, the 3 regular Grand Lodges reacted in a very determined manner and threatened to withdraw their recognition of the Grand Lodge of the Netherlands if he persisted. This situation caused immense concern amongst the Masons of South Africa, many of whom held dual membership of a regular lodge and a Netherlandic lodge. Chaos would have resulted. On February 5th, 1960, letters were exchanged between Most Worshipful Brother Davidson and the Deputy Grand Master in South Africa, Right Worshipful Brother Colonel Graham Berta, in regard to the serious situation in Europe. Davidson suggested that to overcome the complex situation, it might be a solution to form a Grand Lodge of South Africa. Graham Berta had kept the South African heads of other constitutions fully appraised of all the multiplicity of discussions and meetings, and had consulted with senior Masons in South Africa, including Right Worshipful Brother T. and Cranston Day of the English Constitution, as being the recognized expert in Masonic jurisprudence in South Africa. At the request of Graham Berta, Cranston Day examined and rewrote parts of the drafts of the Constitution for the formation of the Grand Lodge of Southern Africa. In his paper, The Formation of the Grand Lodge of Southern Africa and the Roles of the Sister Constitutions, Worshipful Brother K.P. Marcus, Past Assistant Grand Director of Ceremonies, the District of South Africa Western Division, fully covers the involvement of the sister constitutions and the leading part played by Cranston Day. On 22nd April, Grand Lodge of South Africa was inaugurated in a meeting in Cape Town City Hall, attended by no less than 750 Masons of all constitutions. Cranston Day had been requested to represent the Most Worshipful Grand Master of the United Grand Lodge of England at this inaugural ceremony, a fitting recognition of the greatness of the little man and his dedication to Freemasonry. The Masonic protocol in South Africa has been established, and the 4 constitutions continue to work and communicate at district and provincial grand level, and the Grand Lodge of South Africa contacts at international level. The word Southern was changed to South when the Netherlandic lodges in then Rhodesia decided to report directly to Holland and not through their South African colleagues. Periodically there were complaints of poaching of constitutional territory, but that is something of the past. All constitutions visit each other at ordinary level as well as district and provincial level. Harmony prevails, and at this present time the craft appears to be recovering its numerical strength. Having suffered the worldwide fall in membership over the last 30 years, greater public awareness of the good works of Freemasons is becoming evident and more visible. It is now, the public are now aware that in the recent past, 4 homes for seniors have been established on the Abbeyfield system by the Grand Lodge of South Africa. And they also support a home for quadriplegics. These in addition to the interconstitutional seniors homes in Kimberley and Pietermaritzburg, and also in the Transvaal. Viewers of this presentation will by now be wondering if and when there will be a United Grand Lodge of South Africa. In brief, the author is prepared to answer, I do not know. The four constitutions work and assist each other and have joint activities and in such harmony and recognise each other's position that any change would appear unnecessary. The good fellowship is such that where a lodge of one constitution is floundering, it is not unusual for members of another lodge of a different constitution to join the weakling and boost its numbers and help it recover. Any possible change in the present situation would probably be the result of a groundswell of ordinary members more than a decision from the top. There is no problem that cannot be resolved by discussion if there is a willingness to discuss openly and without rancour. A good example of the fraternal happiness is exemplified by the recent visit to South Africa by the Quattro Coronati Lodge 2076 from London, the first regular meeting it had held outside of England in its 125 years of existence. Having held its regular meeting in the English headquarters just outside Cape Town in September 2011, the lodge visited a Scottish lodge, the Royal Alfred, for a working, and later visited Lodge de Goede Hoop at their invitation for yet another working, and later still at the invitation of the English district, they visited a country lodge installation. The good fellowship and genuine Masonic spirit evidenced by both lodges and the visiting Masons leaves no doubt that the strength of the craft is great and will continue as such. I hope this has been sufficiently informative and of interest to you all. Thank you.